Some stories shout to be heard, but the best ones arrive in the quiet. Welcome to Tales from Timber Creek, where every lantern glow, every mountain trail, and even the falling rain has a gentle story to tell. So pull up a chair, sit back, relax. I have a story to tell you. The Cabin Beyond the Noise. High in a range of quiet mountains, where the mornings arrive wrapped in mist and the evenings glow with amber sunsets, there stood an old cabin beside a forest of pine and cedar. The cabin rested on a gentle slope overlooking a valley where rain drifted softly through the trees and deer moved silently at dawn. A narrow path wound towards the porch, curving around roots and stones as though even the trail itself respected the mountain. An old man lived there, alone. No one in the nearby towns knew exactly how long he had been there. Some said he had built the cabin himself decades earlier. Others believed the cabin had simply always belonged to him, the way rivers belong to valleys and stars belong to the night sky. Each morning before sunrise, the old man stepped onto the porch with a steaming cup of tea and listened to the world wake up. He listened to the wind moving through the pine branches. He listened to distant streams rolling over stone. He listened to the soft hush of rain clouds gathering beyond the western ridge. And every morning he smiled as though the mountains had greeted him personally. One autumn evening, as the sky turned copper and gold behind the trees, a traveler arrived at the cabin. His boots were worn thin, his shoulders sagged beneath a heavy pack. His face carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been searching for something for a very long time, without knowing exactly what it was. The old man looked up from the wood he was carving. "You've climbed a long way," he said. The traveler nodded. "I was told there was shelter here." "There is," the old man replied gently, "if you don't mind quiet." The traveler looked out over the valley. Mist drifted between the trees below, and the first evening stars were beginning to appear above the mountains. "I think quiet may be exactly what I need." The old man smiled and opened the cabin door. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar wood, rain-dried wool, and smoke from the stone fireplace. Lantern light flickered softly across shelves lined with carved wooden birds, smooth river stones, and small bundles of dried herbs hanging from the beams. There was no clock on the walls. The traveler noticed this immediately. "How do you keep track of time?" he asked. The old man chuckled quietly as he placed another log onto the fire. "The mountains do that for me." That night, rain began to fall. It tapped softly against the roof while the two men sat beside the fire listening to the storm drift across the valley. The traveler found himself relaxing in a way he had not in years. He realized that for the first time in a long while, no one expected anything from him. No race waited below the mountain. No deadline pressed against his thoughts. Only rain. Only firelight. Only stillness. The next morning, the traveler woke before dawn. He stepped outside just as the first light touched the mountain peaks. The eastern sky glowed with pale gold, while the valleys below remained blue with shadow and mist. The old man sat on the porch, already awake, wrapped in a wool blanket. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said softly. The traveler nodded. "I don't think I've ever actually watched a sunrise before." The old man looked at him carefully. "You've seen many," he said. "You just never stopped long enough to greet one." Those words stayed with the traveler throughout the day. He helped gather wood from fallen branches in the forest. He carried water from a spring farther down the mountain. He swept leaves from the porch while cool autumn wind drifted through the trees. The old man worked slowly in everything he did. Not lazily, not carelessly, just simply without hurry. At first, the traveler found this frustrating. He was used to finishing tasks quickly, always thinking ahead towards the next thing and waiting to be done. But the old man never rushed. When splitting wood, he paused to study the grain. When brewing tea, he waited quietly while the water heated. When the rain rolled across the mountains, he stopped to watch it move through the valley. Finally, one afternoon, the traveler asked, "Why do you move so slowly?" The old man smiled, "Because fast is not the same thing as important." The traveler frowned thoughtfully. The old man pointed towards the mountains beyond the cabin. "Look at them," he said. "Those mountains were shaped by wind, rain, rivers, and time. None of those things hurry, yet they change the world completely." That evening, clouds gathered across the sky. Rain fell again, heavier this time, washing silver curtains across the forest. The two men sat beneath the porch roof, listening to thunder rumble softly through the mountains. The traveler watched water slide from the pine branches. "It feels peaceful here," he admitted. The old man nodded. "Most places are peaceful," he said. "People simply arrive carrying too much noise inside themselves." The traveler looked down at his hands. For years he had chased success, money, recognition, and the approval of people who barely remembered his name once he left the room. Even when resting, his thoughts never stopped running ahead toward tomorrow. Yet here in the mountains, surrounded by rain and cedar and fading evening light, tomorrow suddenly seemed less important than the moment in which he was already living. The next morning, snow dusted the highest mountain peaks. Winter was beginning its slow arrival. The air grew colder each day, and the traveler stayed longer than he had intended. Weeks passed. He learned to measure time differently there. Morning became the sound of wind through the trees. Evening became the glow of sunset across snow-covered ridges. Night became the crackling rhythm of firewood settling into embers. One evening during the first snowfall of the season, the traveler asked the old man a question that had quietly followed him since arriving. "Why do people come here?" The old man sat silently for a moment before answering. "Because eventually," he said, "everyone grows tired of carrying a life that feels heavier than it should." Outside, snowflakes drifted gently through the darkness. The traveler listened carefully. The old man continued. "Most people spend their lives racing forward. They hurry through meals, conversations, sunrises, storms, and seasons. They believe peace is waiting somewhere far ahead." He shook his head slowly. "But peace rarely waits ahead. It usually waits where they finally stop." The fire crackled softly between them. For a while, neither man spoke. The traveler stared into the flames and thought about all the moments he had rushed through without ever truly seeing them. Years that vanished into schedules, friendships squeezed between obligations, sunsets ignored because there was always something more important to do. And suddenly he understood why the old man listened to the mountains each morning. The world had been speaking all along. He had simply been too busy to hear it. Winter settled fully over the mountain. Snow covered the cabin roof and blanketed the forest in white silence. The traveler remained there through long evenings filled with firelight, warm tea, and the steady rhythm of falling snow. And slowly, something inside him began to change. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gently, like ice melting beneath early spring sunlight. One morning near the end of winter, the traveler stepped outside before dawn. The sky was deep blue, and the fresh snow shimmered beneath the fading moonlight. Then, slowly, the sun rose beyond the eastern ridge. Golden light spilled across the valley. The snow-covered trees glowed amber. Mist rose from the river below like drifting smoke. And for the first time in many years, the traveler felt completely still inside of himself. The old man stepped onto the porch beside him. You hear it now, he said quietly. The traveler nodded. Yes, he whispered. When spring finally returned to the mountains, streams rushed with snowmelt and green buds appeared on the trees. Rain softened beneath the earth, and birds returned to the valley each morning with cheerful song. The traveler knew it was time to leave. He packed his bag slowly while morning sunlight filtered through the cabin windows. At the porch steps, he turned towards the old man. I don't know how to thank you, he said. The old man smiled gently. Then don't thank me. He looked outward towards the mountains glowing beneath the rising sun. Just remember what the world sounds like when you stop hurrying through it. The traveler nodded. Then he walked down the winding trail, disappearing into the trees below. The old man remained on the porch long after the traveler vanished from sight. The wind moved softly through the pines. Rain clouds gathered far beyond the western ridge, and the cabin sat quietly among the mountains, just as it always had, waiting patiently for the next weary soul to arrive, carrying too much noise inside their heart. For high in those mountains, where sunrises drift gently across cedar forests, and evening rain sings against old wooden roofs, the world still whispers the same truth. Life was never meant to be rushed. It was meant to be noticed.